All right, so the next panel is probably our first industry-focused panel here for the Queensland event. I myself, I'm Philippe. You can call me Phil. I'm a partner at Innovation Architects and at Mandalay Venture Partners, so traditional venture capital investment fund. And we invest a lot in agri-food technologies. And today, what I'm really excited about is to bring to you a panel of industry leaders in this space. So we have investors represented, as well as supply chain experts, blockchain experts, as well as startup founders who are all doing really amazing things in the agriculture space. And I think it's a really interesting discussion to break open is how does this, this space we're in, blockchain, all these technologies, how does that actually infuse into all of our current industry sectors, priority sectors, what's happening right now, what is going to be happening into the future, and how do we brace ourselves for this immense change that is happening right in front of us. So I'm joined here today by Bridie Ohlsson, CEO and co-founder of Geora, Mark Gustowski, partner at Mandalay Venture Partners, partner or managing director at Innovation Architects, Warwick Powell, chairman at Smart Trade Networks, and then Albert Bielinko, is that how you pronounce it? Yes, growth investor at Telstra Ventures. Albert, it was a real pleasure actually having you on the panel last night as well. As part of our startup pitches. So whoever was here last night, we saw 14 amazing pitches happening as well. All right, I'm not really doing this justice, so I'm gonna pass over to the panel to quickly introduce yourself. And if you are an investor, maybe give us a sense of very briefly what sort of your mandate is and sort of where you play in terms of investment. But we'll start with you, Bridie.
Awesome, thanks Phil. And it's so nice to be here. I love this space. And I think Steve really captured, I guess, where Warwick and I first met, which was like, 2016 in Emerald, I'm pretty sure, out in the middle of nowhere. And we were chatting about blockchain to farmers and a group of farmers. When you talk about Bitcoin back in the day, someone will stand up in the room and tell you what it is. And you'll go, oh, yeah, that's not quite blockchain. And we've come a long way since then. So really cool to be here talking about like the whole breadth of the technology as it is now. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Geora. We are an ag tech, fintech. We're a bit of a slashy, but we are an ag tech company. We provide a blockchain as a service platform to the agricultural industry. We started in the grains industry in Australia as AgriDigital, and AgriDigital still exists, is one of our customers and awesome supporters, and we are the protocol platform that came out of that pilot program we ran through 2016 to 2018. We now have customers across a whole variety of industries, agricultural industries. We mainly play in APAC in terms of our customer base at the moment, but as like a SaaS platform, we have customers using our tools across a whole variety of areas. Sugarcane and coffee in Colombia and a whole lot of different use cases. Basically, the platform works to create data-rich assets, and then we can use those assets to connect farmers in with better financing solutions, more secure trade outcomes, those kind of things.
Awesome, thank you. My name's Mark, a partner at Mandalay Venture Partners. We're an early stage agri-food tech venture fund. What's really interesting in what we're starting to see at Mandalay is a lot of startups that are using the blockchain utility to actually track and provide efficiencies in what they're doing. So whether it's tracking opportunities like beef on the blockchain along with genetics, what Geora is doing, what provenance and traceability opportunities exist to actually track perishables or products through the supply chain. There's lots and lots of really interesting startups that are playing in the space now. At Mandalay, we have an investment mandate of check sizes between about 150 and 1.2 million. So we really sit in that seed to sort of syndicated A stage. We love getting in early, so we love getting in first and being involved in really supporting the founders grow. And we have mandate to invest across the whole of Australia.
Does this work? Hello? Yep, cool. Whether it's on or not. Warwick Powell's my name. I'm with Smart Trade Networks. Many people actually think I'm the beef guy, and I've spent years actually trying to explain to people that I'm not really very beefy at all. I just happened to stumble into beef through funds management that I was involved in about 12 years ago. And in fact, I'm not much of an agri guy either, other than by the fact that we stumbled into it and started to learn a lot more about the industries. What we've done over the last 6 years is built a technology stack at the base layer with a blockchain infrastructure and a network of nodes across, I think, 4 continents, supporting about 40 odd projects, some of which are in food. Projects that are in food using our tools is horticulture in South Africa, Indian Ocean fisheries, beef in Japan, beef in China, beef in South America and North America, and I'm not much of a beef guy, and also some other seafoods coming out of Australia and in North Asia. We really see ourselves as an asset integrity project, because ultimately, coming at all of this from an historic finance perspective, we're pretty simple people, and so we're interested in how information allows us to reduce risk and get a better handle on what the future looks like, and that's what we've been working on.
Hi everyone, I'm Albert Bielinko from Telstra Ventures. So we're a venture capital fund. We've invested more than $1 billion in 87 tech companies so far, including many you might know, like DocuSign, Box, Snapchat, GitLab, many others. In the crypto space, it's been a space I've been following for many years actually, and we've now invested twice in FTX, the incredibly fast-growing crypto exchange. It's probably the fastest-growing company that I've seen up close and personal in my whole career. It's kind of amazing how quickly they've scaled. And then we also invested in Blockdaemon, which is an infrastructure node management and staking company that is also growing very fast. We've got a pretty broad portfolio across lots of different thematics. In terms of kind of ag, we actually have lots of our portfolio companies that sell into ag as part of many things that they do, where ag is a particularly big segment. And then we have another one, which is Gargo, which is a satellite as a service company that sells mainly to agricultural use cases. They're a Chinese company selling to Chinese customers. So they're kind of similar to Orbital Insights. I'm not sure if that's a company that you're familiar with here in the US, but it's certainly a space that we're fascinated by. Over the years, I've invested in drones. For example, we made a drone investment that Motorola acquired, and I've followed the agriculture, the potential of drones in agriculture with interest, but I've kind of been disappointed by the speed, the lack of speed, I should say, of rollout of that technology. But I'm very, very excited by the data capabilities and the data potential in agriculture. We have one of our companies, Trifactor, which is data wrangling that's very relevant to agricultural use cases. We're kind of sifting through the data to run the right algorithms is a really core part of what they do, and really helpful to farmers in ultimately delivering solutions. So very excited to chat to you today. We're typically investing up to 20 mil USD per investment. Usually post-product market fit, companies usually have 1 to 10 mil of revenue, but it does vary quite a lot. And we're investing out of our third fund, which is a 450 mil USD fund.
Well, amazing. Thanks everyone for those introductions. So we're at this blockchain event, but we're talking agriculture. Warwick, you're not an agri guy, all right? You've already said that. You're definitely not a beef guy. And another thing that I saw, Bridie, on your website is a quote: "Farmers know their land and produce better than anyone, but at Geora we know technology." Right? And that really caught my attention. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on how these two worlds actually come together nicely, or not nicely.
I'm just going to steal your mic as I answer your question. The worlds of agriculture and technology, how they combine. Yeah, I mean, I guess when you think of technology more broadly, it's like the application of scientific understanding and knowledge. And that's something that happens in agriculture all the time. Like they're everything from kind of seed technology, if we go back, like refrigeration, canning, these are all technologies that have like fundamentally changed how agricultural supply chains have worked for hundreds of years. And so I think what we're looking at now is, what does digital technology mean for agriculture, the least digitized industry, an industry that faces huge challenges in adopting digital technology, from connectivity and actually being able to upload data, to the challenges, when you have 570 million farmers around the world, and then you have this kind of scale of sustainability challenges we're trying to address, and you go, okay, well, this actually largely requires us to change what we're doing on farm and to change our ways of production, our ways of transporting food, of producing food. You face a huge challenge in trying to connect the two, these disconnected small scale to huge corporate farming enterprises, and kind of the problem space as we see it, which is how do we make agriculture more sustainable, more efficient, more secure? And then we insert kind of digital technology into that space, and there's a huge opportunity, because the challenge is really about connection, and it's about connectivity, and it's how do we connect the produce, the land, the farmer with finance, with trade outcomes, with more secure supply chains. And we see that as an enormous opportunity for data. And I think that, just before we were having a conversation around what does data mean for the future and for how we change our ways of doing things. And in agriculture, it means enormous things. If you, as a farmer, previously you've mainly had one option, whoever's down the road, that's the person who's going to buy your produce. They're going to give you a single price, and that's where you're going to sell. And I think things really change once you start to have different sorts of relationships with trust embedded into them, because you can use a geo-coordinate to execute the settlement of a transaction, rather than just hoping in 180 days you might receive payment through a check or maybe in a bank account. I think that that's an exciting opportunity that we can pursue, and that's something we've been looking at Geora, is can we use real world events along a supply chain, connect in a weighbridge, connect in with geo-coordinates, and use smart contracts to execute different transactions as they exist in the real world, but have them driven by events in the supply chain, and use that to add extra security into what farmers are doing. So we're not standing there trying to say, hey, you should farm differently. We do think that farming with more regenerative and sustainable practices is a good thing, and we want to support that, and we want to help finance that. But really, yeah, we're focused on how do we work with digital technology in a space where farmers use technology, where it's really helpful already, but how do we make this technology really helpful for their operations?
Thanks, Bridie. And Warwick, I was hoping to hear from you, perhaps expanding this story to a supply chain-wide context as well, and perhaps some of the challenges you've seen along the way as well.
Yeah, look, I guess we approach these questions at quite an abstract level first, in terms of designing information systems. So for us, fundamental to what we're trying to do is to tackle problems of information asymmetry and information, or the lack of information synchrony. So it's about timeliness and availability, and also about creating an ecosystem of what we call common knowledge. Common knowledge anchors risk mitigation. So that's the first challenge. So obviously a big problem is persuading people that a common knowledge pool is better than keeping little pockets of information to themselves. The second thing that I guess we've really focused upon is understanding what the real drivers of change are. And because we aren't experts in either production or whatever, we tend to leave a lot of what we call the operational aspects of the particular dimensions of supply chains to those who are involved in them. And they will use data to drive efficiencies and productivity gains. What we're interested in, though, is transaction flows, right? Because supply chains ultimately is about the movement of things in one direction and the movement of money in the other direction. And what separates those two things is time. And time literally means money, either because of delayed payments And because of delayed payments and receipts, it means paying interest on supply chain credit. So if we can compress time between the movement of funds in one direction and the movements of things in the other, then we've actually delivered substantial game-changing changes to a supply chain in fundamental value terms, right? In modern agriculture now, productivity gains of 1%, 1.5%, if you could do that year in, year out, you'd be considered godlike. Right? What we're interested in and what we're achieving in our supply chains are stepwise transformations in cost structures, where shortening supply chains, compressing time is delivering 25 to 30% savings across whole of chains. How do we persuade people of that? We end up being our first use case, always. And that's how we get into things, is to actually prove the ideas by putting our money where our mouth is, proving the case, bringing in partners to take over, because frankly, they are more expert at these things than us and will do them better, but we prove the point. So that's typically how we get over the barriers of supply chain proprietary information approaches.
Thank you, Warwick. And so we're hearing here that when we're talking about tech-enabled agriculture, modern agriculture, we're talking about much more than what happens on farm, on the field. We're talking data, we're talking algorithms, we're talking blockchain on this event. And so I was hoping that, and this is going to be a question for Mark and for Albert, if you could sketch me an understanding of what the future of agriculture actually looks like. What does that encompass? And what fields are you adding another big question on top of that? What fields just really excite you at the moment? And just adding that as a bit of a teaser in terms of where we'd like to invest in as well.
Yeah, so the first thing I'd say is in the 1700s and 1800s, it was widely considered that eventually humans would run out of food and there'd be mass starvation. And then the thing that happened, which I think it was in 1908, was a couple of chemists created ammonium nitrate, which dramatically increased yields. I think it increased yields 5 times. It really changed the game, and that was not at all expected by anyone who was critiquing the situation back then. But it essentially enabled farms to produce a lot more food, and therefore feed a population that has now grown to 8 billion people. So to me, really, I'm excited by everything. I just think we are so early in so many spaces, especially in agriculture. Agriculture has been a space which has been incredibly slow in adoption, much to my disappointment, but the opportunities are massive. I'm extremely excited by real-time payments, as some of my panel members have talked about in supply chain. So I invested in a company called Enable that does rebate management software within supply chains. And I believe that real-time payments will dramatically change all supply chains, and particularly in agriculture, where working capital is really hard to come by. So that's an area I'm very excited by. You know, I think we're seeing a proliferation of sensors and actuators. You know, it has been slower than we'd all like, but you know, we're going to see more and more data captured on everything you can imagine. So things like water use, just much more efficient use of water, which I think is really critical. So that's going to have a really big impact on the ability of farmers to generate more output and therefore feed more people. I think the intersection of finance, you know, as we've kind of alluded to, the intersection of finance and agriculture is incredibly important. So you know, there's a bunch of companies that are currently offering the ability to actually invest in farmland, which as a category has really been quite forgotten. But if you open up the market so it becomes an investable asset like infrastructure, like listed equities, you could imagine much more capital flowing into these farms, and therefore farmers being able to add a lot more capital equipment to make their farms a lot more efficient. So I think that's a trend that's only going to increase. And you know, back to the point on sensors, I think we will eventually see drones and satellites being more productive. I'd say they've struggled because of some of the laws that exist. So the requirement to have visual line of sight to drones, the The low battery life has been very challenging, which has meant low payloads. But, to me, these things will only get better with time, and we're going to see more of an automated farm, more the data being kind of rising to the surface, being cleansed, and more the farmer being kind of the brain that can direct a farm overall, amongst all the backdrop of everything that's happening on the farm and the information that's being received. So I see plenty of opportunity. We really are, if I compare some other spaces, we really are in the infancy in ag tech, I'd say, and Australia is extremely well positioned.
Yeah, ag has been really slow in uptake and adopting new technologies, but there are a couple of areas where, and that's the reason we exist, because we see the gap for efficiencies to be made for farmers and also through the supply chain. But there are 3 areas from, I guess, an early stage fund management perspective where we see the utility of blockchain having a real opportunity to support the ag sector. One is in carbon. And so we're really waiting to see from a regulatory perspective over the next 2 quarters where the carbon markets go. But the work we're doing in the Surat Basin at the moment, one of the largest issues that the farmers have is how do they actually enter and work within the carbon markets. And we're starting to see, we're seeing startups come to us now with applications that allow for tracking of carbon trading on the blockchain that has a traceability to it. And that gives the farmer some assurity about what they can do, the periods of length they need to hold. And so there's probably been 2 really interesting opportunities we've seen in that space. Another one that I spoke about briefly is genetics on the blockchain. There was a company, a startup in the UK that just raised 13 million sterling, Aussie founder called Bridie, that is tracking the genetics through smart contracts across the whole blockchain, including veterinary interventions along the way, and they're achieving 12-13% higher yield at the abattoir because you can actually track what's happened to the animal the whole way through and the provenance of that. And then a lot of other work we're doing with growers at the moment, you'd know this, Phil, is in the provenance and traceability space. So in China, for example, they sell more extra virgin olive oil per year than the world produces per year. So if you work the arithmetic out in your head, there's a lot of fake and nefarious product on the market. We're seeing application now where there's the ability to track and trace across the blockchain, which gives buyers, sellers, and the whole of the logistics chain some more assurance. It actually provides an increase in sale at the end of the chain and across the whole way through. And so there are a couple of the areas that are really interesting for us where we actually see blockchain utility for ag and for farmers. And I think we're going to start to see more of that because as you know, Albert said, it's really just the beginning.
Probably a final question as we wrap up this panel, and that's going to be for everyone. Maybe a final few words of advice if you are any kind of stakeholder actor within the agriculture space. How are we part of these conversations? You know, how do we know what's happening? How do we understand the new technologies? Who do we talk to? And what do we do next?
Can I focus instead on the stakeholders who might be in this room? I'm not sure how many farmers are here. If you are farming or working in the ag supply chain, financing the ag supply chain, like we'd absolutely love to share what we're doing. I think though, more broadly, I think it's quite interesting as a room full of people who care about blockchain technology, to look at the integration of real world assets into this tokenized world that we're playing in. And I think, there's an announcement a few weeks ago from Santander, the bank, I think it's in their Argentina work, where they have actually tokenized a whole lot of like corn, wheat, and soy, and they're financing these tokens. It's kind of interesting. I'm not sure if it's as linked to real world assets as we might get to with all of this fantastic data coming through, coming into the supply chain. But I think, as we think about people who are interested in investing through DeFi products and using crypto into the token space, like consider the agricultural supply chain as a real space to invest. It is often very aligned with a lot of our kind of OG ethos, like ESG ethos as crypto people. And I think it's a really nice way to consider agriculture not as a donation space, but as a real investment space. There's a huge opportunity here.
All right, and we're out of time, but sorry for that. But do find Bridie, Mark, Warwick, Albert out in the audience, out in the open here for a chat afterwards. And thank you for joining us, and thank you everyone for being here. And look forward to spending the day with you.